Today Brian's going to share with you how to make lasagna.
Hi, I'm Brian.
I'm Derica, and you're watching City Studying Cooks.
From our new set, which is really just the other side of the kitchen. But it's new to you! Though, if you watched some of our older brews vids, we kind of used this, but from over there and looking this way instead of this way. But we thought, hey, you know what? We have a stove here, and we have an island, and we have all this stuff, and it's right there! So it made sense to use it. Anyway.
So instead of sitting where you are, where we normally are, and pointing over here saying, hey, we could be using that stuff,
Yeah.
we're actually going to be using that stuff. So yay! Today, however, we're focusing on lasagna.
And not just any lasagna, my lasagna, which makes it special. Everybody has their own lasagna, and that makes it special for them too. Now, I want to point something out. This is the disclaimer portion of the show. Every lasagna is different. I know. Everybody makes it a certain way. I make it this way. If you want to change it, feel free. You want to add stuff? Feel free. You want to put other stuff in it? Feel free. I'm not going to judge. Anyway, this is just a suggestion. If you've never made lasagna before, or you don't know anything about lasagna, this is the video for you. If you make lasagna every other week, you know, take it as you will.
Now, what makes this lasagna special?
Shh!
First of all, Brian is going to make the pasta.
Yeah.
That's right. We're not buying store-bought pasta. We're making our actual sheets of pasta.
Now,
It isn't that hard.
There is plenty of good, decent pasta to buy on the market. That's all good. There's even the ones that you don't have to boil first and all that. It's all fine. I don't have a problem with that. The no boil ones, really, they're just parboiled already and then re-dried. You can actually do this one without parboiling it first. Today we're going to boil it though. It changes the texture slightly. I don't want it to be so fall apart. I want it to have a little chew, so that's why we're going to do it. Anyway, to get started, it's just a typical pasta. The way pasta works is 100 grams of flour for every egg. Or 1 egg for every 100 grams of flour, however you want to look at that. So, we're going to use 300 grams of flour today. We are going to make a lasagna that should fit into this lovely dish. It's about 2 quarts. There's probably going to be some left over because you know what? I use about that much of everything. So you never really know exactly how much it's going to make, and that's okay. We're going to make a smaller one on the side if we need to. It's all good. Okay, so as I said, to make pasta you need 3 eggs and 100 grams of flour per egg. So I got my handy dandy scale out now, teared it out, cleared it, all that good stuff. And I'm going to get...
He just likes to push buttons and make noise.
I'm really good at pushing buttons, what can I say? 300 grams of flour. If you're curious, this is just all-purpose flour. It came from Costco in the big, silly bag. Okay, 300 grams of flour. Now, we want to leave the flour here because, you know, there's always this, you might need a little more, you might need a little less. Now, I got my 3 eggs cracked into a bowl. Why do you crack them into a bowl? I usually don't. I'll be totally honest. I usually crack them right in there, but every once in a while, I miss a shell. And I'm going to scramble these eggs up. And it's a good idea to scramble them up before you put it in there because that way it's a lot easier to work with. You don't have to do it in a bowl. Some people like to just do it right on the board. This board isn't super big, if you notice. We don't really want to make a mess on the floor. I kind of like all the pasta to end up in the lasagna.
If you watched previous pasta videos where we specialize in pasta, we actually have a much larger board and we use that on our kitchen table.
Not today. Why? Because I don't feel like moving the camera back and forth to both spots. That's the truth. That is why. And Derica uses the big board. I actually usually use this. You know why? I'm lazy and don't feel like setting up the big board. That's the truth. So we just mix these together until it forms a dough. It's going to look pretty nasty at first, and it gets smooth as you go. I like to mix it in the bowl as much as possible Just makes for a little bit more of a cleaner way of doing it. The scraper, an essential tool for making pasta. For years I went without them. Never again. When I feel like most of the wet has been absorbed, that's when I'll dump this out. Scrape off everything from the bottom. Get it all in there. And just start bringing it together. You can see there's some yellow bits. That's the egg, where it's still kind of wet. That's why I'm using the scraper. Just keep folding it over on itself like that. And then take off your rings. I just start folding it into itself, folding it over. If you've watched our pasta videos, you know how to do this. I'm showing this for those few people that might not have seen them. Few. You see how ratty this looks? How it's all scraggly? Just give it time. About 10 minutes worth of kneading once you get started. Okay, after about 10 minutes, it looks like this. And if you stick your thumb in it, see how that puffs right back out? That's what you want. That means the gluten's been formed. It'll be nice and stretchy and elastic. But now what we want to do is cover this and let it sit for about half an hour to rest. That'll let the gluten kind of relax, and it just makes everything easier to work with. So we're just going to put it in a bowl, put its lid on top, and set that to the side for about half an hour. Okay, so the next portion of this is the sauce. Now the first part of the sauce is the veg. For that we're using 5 cloves of garlic, 2 whole carrots, and 3 ribs of celery. And notice I just kind of chunked them. I didn't go too fine with it because I'm going to do this the lazy man way. But it actually makes for a little bit smoother sauce this way, and it cooks a lot faster. I'm going to use a food processor. Real simple. We're just going to throw all this into the food processor. Now, I know some people out there are cringing right now. It's okay. Just trust me. It works. And we do, however, every so often want to scrape down the sides. May I have a spatula, please? A spoonula would be lovely. That's right. Spoonula! Best invention ever. Because it's a spoon and it's a spatula all in one. See, now this smells good already. But this is basically just your mirepoix, your starter veggies that you need for any base sauce. But by blending it up, and I'm not making truly a puree of it, it's more just really finely chopped. At this point, I'll pulse it. Okay, let me show you what that looks like. See that? That's pretty much the way you want it. It just looks like ground up carrots, onions, and garlic, right? The next step is the meat. So for that, meet you over at the stove. Okay, since this is a meat sauce, which is bolognese, we want to turn our heat to about medium. We don't want it too hot, we don't want it too cold, and I want to use some extra virgin olive oil. I like this particular brand. It's actually real extra virgin olive oil. It tastes really good too. Put a little bit of that in a warm pan. You never want to add oil to a cold pan. You want to add it to a warm pan. That way it fully coats everything and works much better. We let that go like that. And we bring in our ground beef. Now, if you wanted to, you could use ground pork. I wouldn't be offended by that. We're just going to bring in those pieces. You want it to be thawed. If it's frozen, this makes it much more complicated. Okay, so once you have that in the pan, you want to just break up that meat. and we're just, you know, cooking up ground beef. It's pretty simple. One thing we do want to do is once it gets broken up a little bit, you want to get out some salt. I like pink Himalayan salt personally, and a few pinches. Don't go too crazy, just a little bit. And some black pepper. And I just break up the meat that much more. After, you know, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, this is what you have. Ground beef. No problem, right? Next step, by the way, if you notice, there is not a lot of extra grease in this pan. I let it cook that couple minutes longer, and it cooks it out. A lot of that's actually water, believe it or not. And you don't want too much grease. If your meat is really, really greasy, feel free to dump some of that out. What I'm going to do now is take that vegetable mixture, and I'm going to add that to my pan. I'm just going to spread that around and let that cook up too. I'm still on a medium heat. I did put the meat up to a higher heat for a few minutes just to help cook it down a little bit faster for the sake of the video. I generally do like to cook things slower for this though. Now, the reason for the mashed up, minced up veg, as you can see, this stuff is getting in there quick. It's cooking up really quickly. And that's nice because that way this sauce doesn't have to simmer for like 12 hours to be good. So now that that's cooked down for just a couple more minutes, I'm going to start adding in my seasonings. First is oregano. A lot of people say oregano is not for sauce. Well, I say it is for lasagna because I like it. How much? Geez, I don't know. A teaspoon, a tablespoon maybe? Something like that. By the way, if you're curious how much meat, that was a pound of meat. Okay, I didn't mention that before. Basil, about the same as for the oregano. This is our homegrown basil, by the way. That's about a teaspoon and a half maybe. Thyme, as I always say, you can never have enough thyme. Good sprinkle, like that. Now I'm going to mix that through as well. Now you might be curious as to why I put the herbs in before I added the tomato product. Well, it's just because that's how I like to do it. I like to roast those herbs a little bit, toast them on the heat before they get mixed into the tomatoes. Now, to that, I'm going to add 1 can of crushed tomatoes. Now, this is a 28-ounce can. Oops, sorry, she's trying to hold the camera. 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Can you use whole tomatoes? Sure, but that kind of defeats the purpose of making a nice smooth sauce. If you wanted to make a more rustic sauce, you can certainly do that. Now, see all that extra sauce in there? Guess what? I'm going to add some water. Be right back. All I did was add a little bit of water in there, swirl it around, dump it out. See? Now, no waste. Mix that through. Now, at this point, add a little bit more seasoning, just because we added a lot of stuff there, so maybe another pinch of salt, a little bit of black pepper, and mix that through. It's already starting to look like bolognese sauce to me. If I feel like it's not quite loose enough, I'll add diced tomatoes too. This time, I'm not sure. I think that looks pretty good. If I was going to cook this sauce for many hours, I might add the diced tomatoes. But today, I don't know that it needs it. And that's the funny thing about cooking. Cooking is not like baking. Baking is science, okay? And you have to do things a certain way or things just don't work. With cooking, it's to taste. It's to what you feel like today versus what it is tomorrow or a week from now. Now, sure, you can write down recipes and do the same recipe over and over again, and there's something to that. But I tend to do it based on taste, and my food comes out pretty close to the same every time. But sometimes it's a little bit better. Sometimes it's a little bit different. Sometimes my mood was different when I did it, so I changed it up a little, like this one. See that sauce? That's a little smoother than sometimes. Other times I make it a lot more rustic and chunky. I'm pretty happy with that though. That's good. Now I'm going to turn the heat down to just low, let that simmer while I work on the next part of the sauce.
Okay.
One of the other things that's interesting about my lasagna is there's no ricotta cheese. I know I can hear you screaming already, but In Italy, many parts of Italy that is, they don't put ricotta cheese in lasagna. So I don't either. Guess what? I actually don't like ricotta cheese for the most part. There's some that I like. It's really fresh, it's good, but otherwise not really my thing. So I use a bechamel, which is actually, to me, and in many stories and many recipes, the most authentic way to make lasagna. So here's how I make a bechamel. In a pan over medium heat, drop in some butter.
That was roughly a third of a stick.
And about an equal amount of flour, maybe, yeah, about that much. This is what's called a roux, okay? It's just butter and flour. Whisk them together. And this is a thickening agent. Now, the trick to this is you want to just let that butter melt and soak up all that flour, and it makes like a paste. If it's over too high a heat, you burn the butter. That's not good. If it's not high enough, it won't do this. See the little bubble thing? You want the little bubble thing. Now I can tell from my many years of experience making roux, I didn't put enough flour in. That much. And mix that through. It always looks like it's going to be too dry, then it loosens up again. Now, if we cook this a lot longer, like half an hour, 40 minutes, that'll turn brown. You don't want that for this particular sauce. You want just a very light roux. It has the most thickening power, the least amount of flavor. So really, this is a milk sauce when you think about it. It's kind of a strange thing. I make mine with Parmesan cheese, which I'll get to in just a minute. But you see, I want to cook this down just a little bit. See that foaming action there? That means the cereal-y taste is kind of cooking out of the flour a little bit so that it doesn't taste, you know, like porridge. Give that a minute. I'm using whole milk. This is 2 cups. I'm just going to dump that right in. And now comes the important bit. What you want to do is make sure you get in all those little cracks and crevices around the edges and mix that through really, really good. You don't want any lumps that form of roux because then it just, you know, gets like a lumpy clump of butter and flour in the middle of your sauce, and nobody likes that. While I'm at this point, I'm going to season it. Just a couple of pinches of salt. I don't have any white pepper. I don't mind black flecks in my bechamel, especially in a lasagna. So I'm using black pepper. A lot of people like to use white pepper in bechamel. Whatever. They can use white pepper if they want to. I'm not going to complain about it. And this is going to sound weird, but something else that goes into a bechamel is nutmeg. And I don't mean the sawdust stuff that comes in a bottle. I mean a real nutmeg. Get a microplaner and just, don't need a lot, just maybe a fourth of a nut. About that much. It's important. It adds an extra little bit of flavor that you can't get any other way. I know nutmeg is usually associated with, you know, dessert type things, but it's actually quite common in bechamel. Mix that together. What we're waiting for now is for this to come to a boil. Just barely, because you want that to thicken up. So I'm going to turn my heat up a little bit. And you almost have to keep stirring the whole time. Not really, but, you know, sort of.
Why is that?
Because if you stop stirring at any point and it starts to stick, it'll burn really quickly and probably make something that doesn't taste very good. Now the way roux works is it doesn't come to full potency until it comes to a boil. This is why some people will use cornstarch and things like that as thickeners. For this particular sauce, I prefer a flour-based roux. I think it holds up better over the baking. If I weren't going to bake it, then maybe a cornstarch roux would be okay. But that's a whole different kind of thing, and that's a different show. Now, I usually play around with the heat a bit until I get this to where I want it. Right now, I got it on 9 out of high. which is 9 out of 10, I guess. Although really ours goes to 11 because it goes low, then 1. So that would make high 11, wouldn't it? Haha! You can see it's starting to thicken up. Now is when it's really important. I'm going to lower that heat some and make sure I get those corners. You can see it's thickening though. That's what you want. Almost boiling. See, the bubbles are just starting to break. That's how we want it. Now I can turn the heat completely off. Keep stirring it for a little bit just to make sure there's no clumps. And now I'm going to add some more flavor to it. I have here Parmesan cheese, pre-grated. It's probably about a cup. I'm going to use maybe a quarter cup, third of a cup in there. The rest is for something else. I'm just going to mix that through. Now, if you like this bechamel sauce, you can actually use this for other things. It's awesome on pretty much anything. You can put this on the bumper of a Volkswagen and it'll taste good. It's done. I'm going to take it off the heat so it doesn't cook anymore. It will actually thicken up a little bit more as it cools, and we want it to cool. I like to put my lasagnas together almost room temperature. All right. So now that the sauces are made, and they are cooling, by the way, they're just sitting off to the side, coming back to room temperature. Our dough has been sitting, relaxing for about 30 minutes. I'm going to cut it into pieces. Now, generally, you want to cover this up in between so that it doesn't dry out. Well, today we're going to be a little bit risky, and we're not going to do that, but it's okay. I'm going to do this into fourths. Ooh, you know what? That's still too big, I think. We're going to go eighths. What I'm going to do, cover this up with a little bit of flour. And this is the part that's going to get loud, so you probably won't hear me talk quite as much.
So we're going to talk about what we're doing before we actually do it. And what we're doing is we're using our pasta roller, which is a KitchenAid attachment. We start on 1. This dial here has numbers.
By the way, this is the exact same method if you have the hand crank, the 1, 2, 3, all that. It's the same thing. Excuse me, it's the same thing. You just have to crank it. This does it automatically, so you can do it either way. And if you don't have either of those things, you can also just get out a rolling pin and roll it out by hand. I actually like to do it that way sometimes. That way I don't have to use all the machinery, and it just feels like I'm more in touch with my food.
But today we're using the KitchenAid because we've been talking about the KitchenAid many times in our videos and never used it, and now with our new set we can, so here we go. What we're going to do is we're going to start on 1, and we're going to set our speed probably about 4. And I'm going to pass it through until I work it so that it goes from edge to edge. And from there, I'm going to pass it through on 1 twice, and then I'm going to adjust it to 2. Pass it through 2 twice, and then adjust it to 3. And I'm going to keep on doing that process until I get to a single pass on 5. And we're going to check there because we think that's the thickness we're going to want for our lasagna noodles.
Okay, so this is about what you're looking for. We don't want it to be super thin, but you see, I can just about see my hand through it. Oh, can you make that out? Yeah, I think you can see that. That's the idea. And you don't want them to be too long. I'm going with about the length of my cutting board. Okay, so because this thing's really noisy, and you've already sort of seen me partway do that once, I'm going to go through the rest of these and make all of our noodles up. Actually, a word before we do that. As we're making the noodles up, I have hot water going on the stove. What we're actually going to do is just take them, drop them in real quick, blanch them for like maybe a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. Take them out, put them in ice water. That way they don't stick together and they cool off so they're pliable and ready to go. So next you see us, we'll have all the finished noodles and they'll be blanched. Okay, so we have our bolognese sauce. We have our bechamel sauce. We have our lasagna pan. We have our pasta that has been blanched and cooled. See, I can stick my hand in that. It has to be dried still, but we'll do that as we go so it doesn't stick together. Now, a couple things.
We also have Parmesan cheese.
Yeah.
And
Mozzarella cheese.
shredded mozzarella.
That's for later. I might put a little bit in here, but if you notice, we have all these things laid out this way on purpose because this goes kind of quick and you don't want to have to be reaching for things and go all over the place when you're looking for stuff. The first couple of pieces of pasta though, I want them to be quite wet on the bottom. Some people put some sauce on the bottom. If my sauce was saucier, I might do that, but I'm not. I'm just going to leave some water on the bottom. One thing that you do want to do is set your oven to 350 degrees. It should be ready at about the point that this is done. And you know, I changed my mind a little bit. I'm going to take some of my sauce. Just
And
a
that's
little.
degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh yeah. I'll tell you the Celsius in a note in the bottom here. I just want to get some of this in the bottom. It's the sloppy part of the show. Got to have a little bit. Wouldn't be a city steadying episode if we didn't have a mess. It's my story and I'm sticking to it. The reason you put a little bit in the bottom is just to prevent everything from sticking when you go to take it out later. This being the kind of pot that it is, pan that it is, probably not really so much of an issue. Better safe than sorry. Now, the pasta at this point is very leathery. I mean, you can really handle this stuff. I am going to just lay one out so you can see. And I'm going to use my handy dandy pasta cutter to cut it into roughly the size sheet that I need. Notice I didn't dry both sides, I just dried one side. And see, look at that, it like lays in nice-ish. It's stuck. And then I can just cut a little piece for the side over here. You don't have to be super particular about the piecing, okay? Make it a jigsaw puzzle, it's okay, it can overlap a little, there's no problem. What I tend to do is have like full pieces and then little pieces so I can fill everything in. And, you know, I use different kinds of pans all the time and stuff like that. But anyway, that's our first layer of pasta. You want to just kind of get that laid down like that. Then we take some meat sauce. And just kind of spread it around. You don't want it too thick. Okay, see how I'm doing like 2 ladlefuls there? And then I'm just going to spread it around. That little part there is going to be a problem for me. I just see it already. Then we take some bechamel. Now this came out a little bit thick. Sometimes I'll water it down a little bit. Instead, I'm just going to do some blobs and gloops and globs and, you know, whatever names you want to give it. Again, not too much, not too heavy. This will spread out a little bit as it goes too. You'll see. And some Parmesan cheese. Just sprinkle some of that over. And that is layer 1. Now for layer 2, we're going to dry these sheets of pasta because if we make this too watery from here forward, it's just going to fall apart. We want these sheets to be a little bit drier. So we're going to pat dry both sides. See, she's just sort of blotting that down to get it, you know, dry-ish. It doesn't have to be perfect. And again, I'm going to cut roughly the size of our pan and lay that in. I'm going to put it up to the corner again. See, it's exposing those edges. So we'll just use this little piece here. And we'll start piecing it together. No one will know when you cut this open that it was pieced together. Trust me, it always is. Even when you get it in restaurants and stuff, they do this. And if they don't, or they say they don't, they're lying to you. Nobody gets perfect pieces every single time. There we go. That's covered. Now, again, meat sauce. A couple of spoons. Spread it around. I try not to go too close to the sides because all that's going to do is stick and burn. So keep it off the sides if you can. You know, go close to the edge, but not right up the side, basically. And I need a little more in this one. Bechamel. Oops. You do not want to smack the side of your pan with the spoon. I can tell you that, because if you crack this thing, you're going to be pretty unhappy. A little Parmesan. Next layer. Now keep watching, because this layer is going to be different. First, I'm going to put this to this corner, because I put it to the other corner before. So that way we have the other side exposed this time, kind of crisscrossing those pieces.
So we did our initial overlap here, and then our next overlap was, I think, on the bottom, and now we're doing our overlap on this part, and we're trying to
I
alternate
scalped that one. Oh well. It's fancy now. Got to be a little like Jackson Pollock here, you know. Just kind of spread. Aren't you impressed that I actually knew what that was?
Yes.
Derek is the one who went to school for art. I barely went to school. Okay, the moment you've been waiting for, the mozzarella, please. I put the mozzarella in about halfway through, because if you put it in every layer, it just becomes a big old pile of cheese. Which, as much
Not
as,
that there's anything wrong with that.
in this case, there is. I would normally never say you can have too much cheese. We are a cheesy people, after all. But too much mozzarella inside can still be too much mozzarella inside. I like to use it as more of a structural thing, so it's somewhere in the middle here. That way it helps to bind it all together, rather than have it just gloop out all over the place. Now, if you notice, I didn't put a lot. That was maybe like, I don't know, half a cup, 3/4 of a cup. And now, we continue layering. As we go into this a little bit, you'll notice I'll push down the corners and the sides, and I'll even press the middle just ever so slightly. This pasta is really sticky now, so it will stick to you. What I'm doing is getting a little bit of the air bubbles out. There probably isn't a lot in there to begin with, but air bubbles inside your lasagna, not so good. Alright, so we're coming up on the final layer here. Final layer goes the same as all the other layers. By the way, if anyone was curious how many layers this had, I honestly don't know. I think there's 6 full layers of pasta in it. We'll count later. But if you go by the way Italian restaurants count this, it's a layer of pasta, layer of bechamel, layer of meat sauce, layer of cheese. So if I have 6 layers, that's actually 18 plus the one of mozzarella. I'm not counting the Parmesan as a layer. So that makes 19 layers in my lasagna. Take that, Olive Garden. So now, this always happens. I end up with just the right amount of meat sauce. Like, exactly. And too much of everything else. It's okay. The extra pasta that we have, can totally just cut that up into strips and make like a tagliatelle or something like that. The bechamel.
Do you want to spread out the meat before you
Oh yeah, I probably want to spread out the meat before I put on the bechamel. That's why there's 2 of us. That way there's at least 1.5 full brains going at any given time. I have the half, she has the whole. So when I'm going, it's a half a brain, and then every once in a while she kicks in and we have a brain and a half, so it works really, really well. I can see the comment section on that one now. I asked for it though, so it's all good. But I beat them to it. therefore they can't say anything. Bechamel. I think there might be a little too much to put on here, but let's see what we got. Bechamel sauce is actually really nice with chicken, and like there's so many things you can do with this. It's pretty awesome stuff. Now somebody's going to say that this isn't truly a bechamel anymore because I added cheese, and they'd be right if we were French.
But we're not.
I'm not French. The top layer, you just want to cover up the pasta, okay? Because we've all seen those little burned bits of pasta in lasagna, and it's no good. I don't like that. I actually hate that. To me, that's, you failed at making lasagna. You had one job. Don't burn the pasta. You burned the pasta. We want to put a little more Parmesan cheese on top. Maybe a little more Parmesan cheese on top. Now, the mozzarella goes on top. See how close this is to the edge? I'm slightly worried. Sometimes they boil over. We don't want it to boil over. Another problem that people have that they do is they put too much mozzarella on it. If you pile the mozzarella on, like, you know, an inch of mozzarella on this, it is going to pool over and blow over the sides, and that's not good. You just don't want to do that. Okay, if you notice, see the edge? I'm not going too close because I don't want that cheese to just stick to the sides and burn that. If I had to guess, that was probably 2 cups, maybe a cup and a half. Guess what? I still have some Parmesan left. I probably used 3/4 of a cup of Parmesan cheese to make this lasagna. And I'm just going to sprinkle some more over the top. This is why I didn't add any more salt and pepper, because Parmesan cheese is pretty salty. So it adds a nice amount of flavor without having to add more salt, even though it's salted. So technically you're still putting salt in it. It's assembled. It's heavy. Yeah, that is like serious. Anyway, so what we're going to do with this is going to go into our preheated 350-degree oven for about 1 hour. What you want to look for is for this cheese to just be starting to bubble and brown a little bit. I don't like the whole burnt thing. So after 45 minutes, I'm going to check it and see where it's at. I know it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour because that's how long it takes in my oven. Your oven might be a little different. So I'd start checking at 40 to 45 minutes.
If you have made your lasagna to a scarily full level like we have, take this trick from me. Place it on top of a edged cookie sheet, so that way anything that boils over will be caught by the cookie sheet and not go all over your oven.
Learn from my mistakes. Okay. All right, so this was in the oven for about an hour. Then I let it sit on the stove cooling for about a half an hour. It's okay, it's still really hot. But you see all this browning? That's what we want. See how it still looks like cheese in the middle? That's good too. We cut a piece out, as you can see in this little B-roll snippet. And here it is. And I have a knife, but don't really need one. Oh, look at that.
It smells so good.
You shouldn't make this.
Actually, you should make it and then just ship it to us.
Just send it to us. Yeah. I don't know how hot it is. Hot? Good. But is it good?
Mm-hmm. If you've never had lasagna made with bechamel rather than ricotta, you will probably be shocked at how rich and creamy and cheesy this is.
Right.
With the small amount of cheese that Brian actually added.
There's a lot of cheese in there.
But I mean, the bechamel layers
Oh, yeah.
reflect the texture and richness of the one layer you did with the mozzarella.
Gotcha. So I'm going to give my opinion here as to why there's ricotta in lasagna. I've been to Italy. I've never seen ricotta in lasagna in Italy, in the places that I've been, okay? I'm sure somewhere they do it, and that's okay. I think when they came to America and they started making things, they had different ingredients. Now, ricotta is actually used in Italy, but it's usually like they put a little olive oil on it and eat it. Like it's like cottage cheese here. So, in the United States, though, people ate lasagna at their Italian friend's house. I'm going back a few years, and said, "Oh, I know what that is." And they went home and got ricotta cheese and made it with ricotta cheese. I don't think it actually was supposed to have it, though. So what happened is, over time, people just started making it that way, and that it became an accepted way to have lasagna. Fun fact, growing up, I didn't like lasagna. Want to know why? Because Mom made it with ricotta cheese, and that was the one thing I did not like about it. Everything else about it was great. One thing, if you like this video, give us a like. If you like what we're doing here, hit subscribe. And that little bell icon, they say it actually works. And if you want to be part of the VIP club, join on Patreon. There is a link below, and a card should show up about here. That way you get some insider tips and tricks. You get to see what we're up to behind the scenes, and you get to be part of our VIP club on Facebook, where we show behind the scenes videos and extra material that you can't get anywhere else. As always, thanks guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.